Have you ever noticed that certain people simply disappear? Not physically, but in a much more subtle and disturbing way. They are there in the same environment, the same meetings, the same social groups, but something fundamental has changed. It's as if an essential part of them has disconnected from the collective game we all play daily. They continue to participate in conversations, but you feel they are observing everything from a strange distance, like anthropologists studying a tribe they no longer belong to. If you've ever felt this about someone close, or perhaps about yourself, you're witnessing one of the most fascinating and unsettling phenomena of our era. The silent awakening of individuals who have begun to question the fundamental structures of our social reality. This is not a dramatic or revolutionary process in the traditional sense. It doesn't involve street protests or political manifestos. It is something much deeper and in a way more radical. It is the moment a person realizes that much of what we consider reality is in fact an elaborate collective construction kept alive by our unconscious participation in belief systems we've never truly questioned. When someone wakes up to this perception, something irreversible happens. They can no longer pretend not to see the invisible strings moving the theater of social life. For thousands of years, human beings lived in small, cohesive communities where social rules, values, and hierarchies were clearly visible and directly experienced. If someone questioned the system, it was immediately noticeable and dealt with by the community. The dissenter was confronted, persuaded, or in extreme cases, exiled. But the system itself was simple enough to be understood by any member of the tribe. Power relations were direct, consequences were immediate, and the purpose of each ritual or social rule was relatively clear. With the development of complex civilizations, something extraordinary happened. We created systems of social organization so elaborate and multifaceted that no individual can fully understand how they function. We live in a society built on layers upon layers of abstractions. Financial systems few comprehend. Political structures that operate according to obscure logics. Global networks of production and distribution, and cultural narratives that shape our desires and aspirations in ways we rarely perceive. Most of us navigate this complexity by following learned social scripts, trusting that others know what they're doing, accepting that the system somehow makes sense. But occasionally, something happens in a person's mind. It could be a personal crisis, a profound loss, a moment of silent contemplation, or simply the gradual accumulation of small contradictions that can no longer be ignored. Suddenly this person begins to see what was always there but remained invisible, that much of what we call reality is an extraordinarily elaborate collective performance. They realize that the global economy depends on stories we tell about the value of money, that political systems work because we collectively believe in concepts like authority and legitimacy, that our personal identity is largely constructed from narratives we absorb from the surrounding culture. This initial perception can be liberating, but also deeply disorienting. Imagine discovering you've spent your entire life in an elaborate game without ever realizing it was a game. Your emotional reactions, ambitions, fears, relationships all still real and important, but now there's a new layer of awareness, observing it all with a strange sense of detachment. It's like waking up inside a dream and continuing to dream, but now knowing you're dreaming. What makes this awakening particularly disturbing in our era is that the systems we're awakening from have become more sophisticated and pervasive than ever. Digital technology hasn't just created new types of social games. It has dramatically intensified our participation in the games that already existed. Our social networks are not just tools for communication. They are elaborate systems of social validation that constantly shape our perception of ourselves and our relationships. Our mobile devices are not merely convenient. They have become extensions of our consciousness, mediating almost every interaction with the world. When someone wakes up to the constructed nature of these systems, one of the first things they notice is how their attention has been captured and directed by algorithms designed to maximize engagement. They begin to notice how their emotions are constantly manipulated by news feeds that prioritize content, provoking strong reactions, how their desires are shaped by advertising, using personal data to target them with surgical precision, how their political opinions are influenced by information bubbles that continually reinforce their existing beliefs. I want to pause for a moment and ask, have you ever felt that strange sensation of watching your own life from the outside? That awareness that maybe you're participating in structures and systems you never consciously chose? I know it can be uncomfortable to admit, especially in a world that values the appearance of control and certainty. But if this feeling resonates with you, share in the comments. I question my participation in the system when your honesty might help others realize they're not alone in this deep unease many of us carry in silence. As this awareness deepens, the awakened individual faces a complex existential dilemma. On one hand, they can no longer participate in social games with the same innocence as before. Conversations about careers, material success, social status, cultural trends all begin to feel strangely hollow, as if everyone is reciting lines from a script no one remembers writing. On the other hand, simply opting out of these systems is not a realistic option. We still need to work, pay bills, maintain relationships, care for family. Practical life continues to demand participation in the constructed world, even when you clearly see its artificial nature. This tension creates a very specific kind of alienation. It's not the alienation of classical Marxism, where the worker feels disconnected from the products of their labor, nor is it existentialist alienation, where the individual confronts the apparent meaninglessness of the universe. It is a subtler, perhaps deeper alienation, the experience of living consciously within a collective illusion, knowing it is an illusion, yet being unable to fully escape it or convince others of its illusory nature. People who undergo this awakening often experience what we might call a gradual social disappearance. They don't make dramatic statements or violently break from their previous lives. Instead, they slowly withdraw from enthusiastic participation in games they now perceive as artificial. They stop seeking validation through conventional achievements. They reduce their presence on social media. They become less interested in political debates they view as theatrical. Their conversations become deeper but less frequent. They are still physically present, but something essential has withdrawn from the collective game. This process is especially accelerated by the nature of information in our era. Never before in human history have ordinary individuals had access to so much information about the inner workings of the systems that govern their lives. Through the internet, we can read about psychological manipulation strategies used by advertising, the mechanisms through which the media shapes public opinion, the ways corporations influence politics, the psychology behind the addictive design of social networks. This unprecedented transparency makes it increasingly difficult to maintain the naivety needed to fully participate in systems that rely on our unconsciousness to function. At the same time, our era has also produced sophisticated conceptual tools to understand these phenomena. Cognitive psychology has taught us about the biases that distort our perception of reality. Sociology has shown us how social structures shape our individual possibilities. Anthropology has revealed the cultural relativity of many of our most fundamental beliefs. Neuroscience has begun to unravel the mechanisms by which our brain constructs our subjective experience of reality. When these perspectives converge in a person's mind, they can create a devastatingly clear understanding of how constructed our everyday experience truly is. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this awakening is the realization that the very search for authenticity or truth can become just another sophisticated game. People who awaken often find themselves drawn to communities of other awakened individuals, only to discover that these communities can develop their own rigid scripts, their own forms of conformity, their own status systems, based on how aware or enlightened someone is considered. The irony is that the awakening from illusion can itself become a new form of illusion. This realization leads to an even deeper level of awareness. Perhaps there is no true outside to systems of social construction. Perhaps human consciousness is, by its very nature, a social phenomenon that always operates through shared structures of meaning. Perhaps what we call awakening is simply the movement from one set of social constructions to another, potentially more sophisticated, but not necessarily more true in any absolute sense. This perception can lead to both despair and a strange form of liberation. Despair because it suggests we may never fully escape the constructed nature of human experience, but also liberation because it removes the pressure to find some ultimate reality behind all constructions. Instead, it opens the possibility for more conscious and intentional participation in the games we choose to play. People who reach this deeper understanding often develop a completely new approach to social life. They don't withdraw completely, nor do they participate naively. Instead, they become something like conscious players, engaging with the necessary social systems while maintaining a clear awareness of their constructed nature. They may pursue professional success, but without confusing that success with inherent personal worth. They may sustain deep romantic relationships, but without projecting onto them impossible expectations absorbed from popular culture. They may engage politically, but without fully identifying with partisan ideologies. This kind of conscious participation requires a delicate and constant balance. It's like learning to dance a choreography whose every step you can see, yet still finding a way to move with grace and genuine joy. It demands developing what we might call ironic sincerity. The ability to fully engage in activities and relationships while maintaining a playful awareness of their constructed nature. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about these people is how they often become more effective in their practical lives, not less, freed from the need to prove something through external achievements. They can focus on what truly matters to them. Without the pressure to maintain a specific social image, they can be more honest in their relationships. By understanding the mechanisms of manipulation around them, they can make more deliberate choices about where to direct their attention and energy. But perhaps the most significant aspect of this awakening is how it affects a person's relationship with suffering. When you understand that much of your suffering comes from trying to meet expectations that were implanted in your mind by systems you weren't even aware of, a deep form of relief becomes possible. It's not that all problems disappear, but the nature of suffering fundamentally changes. Instead of being something that happens to you, it becomes something you can observe and understand. This transformation in the relationship with suffering has implications far beyond individual experience. When enough people in a society begin to awaken in this way, the entire social structure begins to change. Systems that rely on unconscious participation start to lose their effectiveness. New forms of social organization become possible. New ways of relating to technology, work, consumption, and relationships begin to emerge. We may be witnessing the early signs of this transformation in our era. The growth of movements like mindfulness, the increasing search for a life with purpose, the popularity of contemplative practices, the growing interest in philosophy and psychology, all of this can be seen as manifestations of a gradual collective awakening. Even the rising interest in conspiracy theories, although often distorted, may reflect a correct intuition that there are layers of reality that usually remain invisible. But this awakening also presents new challenges for society as a whole. Economic systems that rely on status-based consumption may become unsustainable when enough people stop finding meaning in material acquisition. Political systems based on emotional mobilization may lose their grip as people become more aware of how their emotions are being manipulated. Educational structures designed to produce obedient workers may need to be completely reimagined once students begin to question the very foundations of what they are being taught to value. Artificial intelligence and emerging technologies add an extra layer of complexity to this process. As machines become capable of performing many of the cognitive functions that define human labor, we are forced to question not only how we organize our society, but what it means to be human in the first place. If much of what we consider uniquely human can be replicated by algorithms, what unique role do conscious human beings have in the universe? This question becomes even more urgent when we consider that the same technologies that can replace us in many tasks are also incredibly effective at influencing our thoughts and behaviors. We are creating AI systems that not only can do what we do, but that are better than us at convincing us what to think, feel, and want. In such a context, the ability to maintain critical awareness over our own mental experience may be one of the few distinctly human advantages we have left I need to pause for a moment and ask directly, which aspect of this future we are building stirs the most unrest in you? Do you also lie awake at night thinking about what it means to preserve our humanity in a world of increasingly intelligent machines? Share in the comments. My greatest fear about our future is. Your reflection may help create a space where we can honestly discuss the collective challenges we all face. But perhaps there is reason for cautious optimism. The same process of awakening that can be disruptive for individuals may also be the beginning of a more mature and conscious form of human civilization. For the first time in history, we have the intellectual and technological tools to clearly understand how our societies function. We have the capacity to design social systems more intentionally, rather than simply inherit structures that evolved unconsciously over millennia. Imagine a society where education focuses not only on transmitting information or technical skills, but on developing the capacity for metacognition to observe and understand our own mental processes. Imagine economic systems consciously designed to promote human well-being and ecological sustainability instead of blind growth. Imagine technologies developed with full awareness of their psychological and social effects, designed to amplify our capacity for awareness rather than capture it for commercial purposes. These possibilities may seem utopian, but consider that every great transformation in human history began with individuals who could see beyond the limitations of their time. The abolition of slavery seemed impossible to most people in the 18th century. Representative democracy was unthinkable for societies organized around absolute monarchies. Women's rights were considered contrary to human nature for centuries. In every case, changes that seemed impossible became inevitable once enough people began to question fundamental assumptions that had previously been accepted without question. What makes our era unique is the speed at which information and perspectives can spread. An idea born in one person's mind can reach millions within hours. Communities of people who share similar perspectives can form instantly across continents. Individual awakening can become collective awakening faster and more thoroughly than ever before. But this also means we are in a race against time. The same technologies that enable the rapid spread of awareness also enable sophisticated manipulation of awareness on unprecedented scales. Social control systems based on digital surveillance and algorithmic behavior modification are developing rapidly. If we do not develop our collective capacity for critical awareness quickly enough, we may find ourselves living in a form of totalitarianism more subtle and effective than anything Orwell imagined. The central question of our era may be this: will we awaken to the constructed nature of our social reality quickly enough to consciously take control of our cultural evolution? Or will we be controlled by systems that understand our psychology better than we do? This is not a question that can be answered by experts or political leaders. It is a question each of us must face individually, and one that can only be answered through our collective choices. The silent disappearance of people who have awakened from the system may paradoxically be the first sign of their reappearance in a more conscious